She thought she could plug into his kindness forever until he flipped the switch and let her experience the consequences of her entitlement. A quiet neighbor, a powerful solar grid, and a revenge served cold. This is the story of how one man taught his HOA president a lesson she'd never forget. Welcome, everyone. Before we dive into this epic story, I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below, and let's see how far this story travels. Now, grab some popcorn, because this one's going to get intense. Max had spent years perfecting his self-sustaining lifestyle. Living in a quiet neighborhood, his home was powered entirely by solar energy, a choice driven by both environmental concerns and a desire to save on energy costs. His solar grid was top tier, supporting not only his home, but also his electric car, which had allowed him to fully embrace his eco-friendly routine. He loved the freedom it provided, never having to rely on traditional power sources. But his idyllic life would soon be interrupted by Karen, the newly elected HOA president. Karen was the kind of person who believed rules didn't apply to her, especially if they got in the way of what she wanted. It started subtly, with her knocking on Max's door, asking if she could plug her Tesla into his solar grid just for a little while. She explained that she had been waiting for her own charger to be installed, but in the meantime, she needed to charge a car. Max, being the good neighbor he was, didn't hesitate to help out. The next day, Karen returned. Then the day after that, Max didn't mind at first, figuring it was a temporary request. However, as the weeks passed, he noticed Karen showing up more frequently, each time asking to charge her car for hours. Max reluctantly agreed, each time growing more irritated. But not knowing how to say no, he had his suspicions that something was not right. But he still hesitated to cause trouble. As time passed, Max began noticing something strange. His solar grid's performance was starting to dip. Max, who was meticulous about tracking his energy usage, saw a clear pattern. Every time Karen plugged in her Tesla, his energy consumption skyrocketed. At first, he thought it was just a coincidence, but then it became a daily occurrence. His electricity bills were creeping up, and his solar grid wasn't performing as efficiently as it once did. Karen's visits became routine. She would show up around the same time every day, plug in her Tesla, and disappear for hours. Max started keeping track of the time she spent charging, realizing that she was taking far more energy than she'd ever admitted. The strain on his solar system was starting to show. One evening, Max decided to check the system's logs. His suspicions were confirmed. Karen had been using far more energy than he was comfortable with, and there were clear discrepancies in his energy records. Max, though usually calm and laid back, felt a growing sense of betrayal. Karen had crossed a line, but as much as he wanted to confront her directly, he knew that doing so might escalate the situation in ways he didn't want. Instead, Max decided to approach the problem with his own brand of quiet defiance. Max's frustration reached its peak when Karen returned one afternoon, this time with a new request. "I'll only need to charge for an hour," she said. Max glanced at his solar grid, noticing the red warning lights flashing on the system control panel. The grid was already running at overcapacity. "Karen," Max said, trying to maintain his composure, "I really can't let you keep doing this. My system's at its limit." Karen rolled her eyes, dismissing his concerns as if they were nothing. "Oh, Max, come on. I'm just trying to keep my Tesla charged. You should be honored you're helping out such an important cause, you know," she said with a smirk. Max gritted his teeth. "It's not about that, Karen. It's about respect. You're using my electricity without asking, and it's taking a toll on my grid. I'm not some free charging station." Karen waved him off. "You're overreacting. It's just a little charge. I'll be quick." Max stood there, jaw clenched, watching as Karen plugged her Tesla in again. His patience snapped. This wasn't just a harmless request anymore. It was a violation of his trust, and it had to stop. He felt his anger rise, not only because of Karen's audacity, but because the community he lived in was beginning to side with her. The other neighbors, passive and unwilling to make waves, didn't want to deal with Karen's wrath. Max was on his own. Max, though angry, was also calm and calculated. Instead of just confronting Karen and making a scene, he decided to outsmart her. He would teach her a lesson she wouldn't forget. Max knew his solar grid inside and out, and he had the technical knowledge to manipulate it in ways that Karen would never understand. He began adjusting the voltage on his system. Max set the grid's output to maximum voltage, knowing full well that it would likely cause serious issues for her Tesla. He checked his system's safety features, ensuring that everything would automatically shut off if things got too dangerous. But for now, he wanted to see how far he could push it. He figured if Karen was going to keep exploiting his system, she should experience the consequences of her actions. The next time she plugged in, it was going to be an unforgettable experience. That evening, as Max sat on his couch, he saw Karen's familiar Tesla pull into his driveway. He glanced at the control panel. It was time. He smiled to himself, watching as Karen, unaware of what was about to happen, plugged in her car. The voltage surged, the system hummed, and Max waited. Max had never seen Karen so nonchalant. She was oblivious to the fact that her car was charging with far more power than it was designed for. Max watched through his window, seeing the charging process begin as usual. But this time, something was different. The dashboard of Karen's Tesla started flashing warning lights. At first, she didn't notice. She was busy chatting on the phone, unaware of the slow disaster unfolding. Then, the error messages began. Warning. Overload detected. The Tesla's system beeped loudly, but Karen, still in denial, tried to dismiss it. She even reset the car's charging system, trying to get it back on track. But the more she tried to fix it, the worse the system reacted. Max could hear the Tesla's internal components struggling to keep up with the overload. The lights on the dashboard flickered wildly. Finally, Karen glanced up, realizing something was horribly wrong. What's going on with my car? She muttered to herself, panic rising in her voice. The Tesla was overheating, and the charging cable began to smoke lightly as the power surge overwhelmed the car's systems. Max, enjoying the chaos unfold, calmly walked outside. He approached the car, feigning concern. Karen, is everything okay? It looks like your Tesla's having a little trouble. Karen's face turned bright red. What did you do? She demanded. This is your fault. You're going to pay for the damages. Max raised his hands innocently. I didn't do anything, Karen. I just let you charge it like you asked. I didn't think you'd mind the extra power, considering you're doing your part for the environment. Karen's face twisted in fury. She jumped out of the car, trying to disconnect the charging cable, but it was stuck. Max knew the overload had fried the charging port, and now Karen was stuck in a mess of her own making. She tried tugging the cable with all her might, her face red with frustration. I'm calling the police, she shouted. You can't just mess with my property like this. Max held his ground. Go ahead. But I think the real issue here is that you've been using my electricity for weeks without permission. That's not something I'm just going to let slide anymore. Neighbors who had been watching the scene unfold started whispering among themselves, some nodding in agreement with Max's actions. Word quickly spread that Karen had been taking advantage of the community, and the sympathy was now firmly on Max's side. Karen realized she'd made a serious miscalculation, but it was too late. She was left to deal with the fallout. The aftermath of the charging fiasco was swift. Karen, embarrassed and defeated, demanded that Max pay for the damages to her Tesla. Max, however, remained calm and firm, refusing to take any responsibility. You used my grid without asking, he said. The car malfunctioned because you overstepped. That's on you. Karen. In the end, Karen backed down. She realized she had no legal grounds to make Max pay for the damages. The HOA, which had once stood behind her, started to distance themselves from her actions. Max had exposed her entitlement for what it was, an abuse of trust and a violation of community standards. Max's quiet revenge had worked perfectly. Not only had he saved his solar grid from further abuse, but he'd also turned the tables on Karen in a way that made her regret ever messing with him. The other neighbors, seeing how Karen had been outsmarted, began to rally behind Max, and the once feared HOA president was left with nothing but a malfunctioning Tesla and a bruised ego. Max, satisfied with the outcome, returned to his peaceful, solar-powered home, knowing that sometimes the best revenge was simply letting the system do the work for you.